The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask those to stand and face the flag. Next is approval of the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda
So moved.
by Mr. Hess,
Second?
second by Mrs. Friedman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is I need a motion to take item number, I guess it's 11, personnel recommendations out of order, and then we'll take under new business. Item number A, discussion and/or a vote, but there will be no vote tonight, about the school committee's recommendation for the $83 million construction bond plan. So I have a motion for that.
So moved.
So moved by
Me.
Mr. Fiorello,
Second?
second by Mrs. Friedman. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-0. Kelly Drake, you here? Oh, okay. We could go to the podium? Great. Go ahead.
Good evening. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on 5 leaves of absence. The unpaid leave of Kelly Cleary, grade 2 teacher at community school for the 2019-20 school year. The unpaid leave of Keith Caldwell, instructional technology teacher at Cumberland High School for the 19-20 school year. The FMLA leave of Erica Coletti, grade 1 teacher at BF Norton School, with an anticipated start date of February 3rd, 2020 through the end of the 2019-20 school year. The FMLA leave of Anais Hazard, EL teacher at Ashton School, with an anticipated start date of January 6, 2020, and an anticipated return date of March 2nd, 2020. And the FMLA leave of Lindsay Wesson, kindergarten teacher at Aston School, with a start date of October 7th, 2019, and a return date of January 2nd, 2019. Excuse
Right.
me, 2020.
I need a motion on these 5 leave of absences.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve by Mr. Fiorello.
Second.
Second by Mr. Salvatore. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-0. Proceed. Thank you.
I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Susan Bleeker, academic coach at Garvin Memorial School, with an effective date of August 28th, 2019.
And I need a motion for the current employee for the change in position.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Mr. Hess.
Second?
Second by Mrs. Friedman. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-0. Just want to note for the record that Susan Bleeker is already an employee of the school district. Next is the new hires.
I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the following new hires. Patricia Blanche, paraprofessional in the Success DBP program at McCourt Middle School, with an effective date of August 29th, 2019. Stephanie Bonner, grade 3 at Community School, with an effective date of August 28th, 2019. Daniel Curran, ELA Essentials teacher at Cumberland High School, with an effective date of August 28th, 2019. Catherine Desilets, ELA Essentials teacher at McCourt Middle School, with an effective date of September 16th, 2019. Hannah Forsberg, grade 2 for 1 year only at Community School, with an effective date of August 28th, 2019. Kelly Gruby, reading specialist for 1 year only at BF Norton Elementary School, with an effective date of August 28th, 2019. Margaret Keefe, ELA Strive teacher at Cumberland High School, with an effective date of August 28th, 2019. Carol LaValle, grade 4 for 1 year only at Garvin Memorial School, with an effective date of August 28th, 2019. Ryan Pierce, custodian nights at Community School, with an effective date of September 23rd, 2019. Erin Salbui, school nurse teacher at BF Norton Elementary School, with an effective date of August 28th, 2019. And Brittany Tutkin, special educator in the Strive Trade Program at Cumberland High School, with an effective date of August 28th, 2019.
Okay, I need a motion to approve these 11 new hires.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Mr. Fiorello.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hess and Mrs. Friedman. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-0. And you have one correction?
Yes. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the corrected salary step of Megan O'Hare, kindergarten for 1 year only, at Cumberland Hill School with an effective date of August 28th. The previous step approved was step 8.
And I need a motion for this correction of salary.
I'm sorry, what is the correction? Jeez.
Going from a
Step
step 8 to 3.
Oh, I like that. Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Mrs.
I'll second.
Waters, second by Mr. Freeman. All in favor? Ayes have it, 7-0. All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Next on the agenda, we're going to go right to the item number A, a new business discussion and a vote to approve the school committee recommendation for the $83 million school construction bond plans. We have tonight with us Colliers International, Toronto Architects, and the superintendent will all be speaking about this. I have taken all the questions that were on Facebook and provided these answers, I mean, not answers, but questions to everyone here in the room so that they could answer any questions possible. If we don't have an answer for you tonight, we will get you an answer or answer it next Thursday as well, when we expect to take a vote to move forward with our recommendation to the building committee that the town approves. So with that, I will give this to Mr. Torado or Colliers.
Colliers.
All right, we're going to go to Colliers. So the school committee, we can go out here into the audience because they're going to be projecting everything up on the screen in front of it and behind us.
I think so. There you go, Bob. Great. Great. Well, thank you and good evening. Thank you for having us this evening. We're excited to present some updates as we look toward a stage 2 submission for all of the capital improvement projects planned here in Cumberland for the $83 million bond that was passed locally by voters. So just wanted to kind of take a look back, introduce myself again, and introduce Colliers. So I'm Derek Osterman. I run Colliers Project Management Office here in Rhode Island. We are located down in Providence and have assembled a team to oversee and guide you through this process. With that in mind, I thought I'd introduce some of the folks that are here with me tonight who really have been key in getting us ready with RIDE meetings and getting us off the ground as we get ready to propose some work that Bob and Lewis will talk to you in greater detail. So again, I run our project management office. Holly Demers is really helping us with the RIDE relations as well as the management of the overall project. And Frank Gianfrido brings construction expertise. So as we do this initial planning, look at estimating, and then eventually transition into design and construction, he'll be a team member you'll see quite a bit. In addition to that, I'm supported by more than 150 professionals locally, but specifically wanted to call attention to my engineering team, financial monitoring and reporting, as well as cost estimation. So as we get ready to talk about tonight and what we've done to date and what the path ahead looks like, I wanted to revisit some information that I had shared with the school committee and facilities committee earlier about really what's ahead and what we understand the next several years to look like for Cumberland as we complete these projects. So obviously was really excited to see the momentum that led up to that passing of the $83 million bond. I know the superintendent and your local senator, Senator Pearson, really put a lot of effort getting the word out about what you were looking to do, making sure that you were really ready to take advantage of the additional funding that the state was providing. So that was great to witness and to some regard be a part of on the back end. Now as we get ready to begin this 5-year capital improvement program, we're looking for state approval on the individual projects next May. So really between now and then, we'll be refining the specific scopes at each of the schools, making sure we understand schedule, making sure we understand phasing, so that we're set up for success as we start to really get into the details of design and construction. I know something that we had talked about in our initial conversations with the district, and I thought it would be great to share in this forum this evening, is the baseline housing aid that you're receiving, but then this idea of all the bonuses that are available. So up to a community such as yours could receive up to 20 bonus points. We'll do our best to make sure that that's maximized and you're getting the most reimbursement possible. Part of that is making sure that we do really keep on a fairly accelerated track. Some of these start to expire already. It seems like, Article 9 just went into place. But in fact, some of the first bonuses begin to expire in 2020. So we want to make sure we're in good shape, have contracts in place. So with all of that in mind, understanding a little bit more about the district and then what we're looking to do, something that I had done initially when I was researching what this was going to look like for Cumberland and in my discussions with other superintendents around the state and then talking to your superintendent, some numbers that really stood out to me after having talked to other folks around the state is this idea that Cumberland has fairly low per pupil spending, but pretty exceptional academic results in terms of what you're delivering. You have a blue ribbon school, you have 2 5-star schools in general. So really a lot to be proud of in terms of what you've been able to accomplish with your facilities and the curriculum that's being delivered. And so my hope is that as the OPM overseeing the construction piece, that we can really enhance that and make that even better. But a lot to be really proud of here in Cumberland. Then in terms of the high-level information about what we'll be looking to do, I think leading into this, there was an awful lot of talk about focusing on the elementary schools, making sure that there's parity there, making sure that all of your schools are safe, a focus towards K and early childhood learning. I know earlier in the year that had been a big push from the administration, the governor's office on down in terms of what more can we do? Should we start to be looking to universal pre-K? So initial conversations around that and understanding how that makes sense in the current landscape for Cumberland. Then something that had come up in terms of the initial findings that we were able to read into is this idea that some of the schools really are overcrowded and some of the spaces could be better positioned to support your students. Your blue ribbon school has 6 lunch periods. We can do better than that. You're doing a great job with what you have, but let's see what we can do as we make these capital investments, obviously access. And then as we move through the design process, a real focus on swing space and making sure that the construction process, while not 100% painless perhaps, has minimal impact on the day-to-day lives of both the faculty and of course all of the students, because really this is, we're looking for student-centered learning spaces and we're looking for a student-centered learning experience in terms of kind of coming through this construction and being really proud of what we accomplish on the other end. So if we talk a little bit about schedule, it's a bit too early to give you specifics on which campus will go first, what the exact order looks like, and how all of the pieces are going to align, because we're still looking at estimates in terms of the work that will be done, as well as strategically how we place people to minimize impact on people's lives, as I had talked about. But again, understanding that really right now, coming out of 2019 and looking ahead to the first quarter in 2020, Really, it's about planning. It's working with the state. It's making sure that we have a really strong foundation as we start to begin all of this design and construction. Then we have some sample schedules of what it would look like if we staggered renovations and additions to your schools so that there's a clean and easy sequence from campus to campus of design in the yellow with state check-ins that are stars. Bidding typically is in the winter season when we're most likely to get preferred pricing or best pricing, being out in the market in terms of labor and commodities and those sorts of things. And then looking at typically one-year build periods tied to fiscal year-end closeout so that we minimize the amount of time that you have to wait between upfront spend and when the state starts paying you back. And then the red in each of those bars is the occupancy and closeout period. So typically we're building over the course of a year, closing out over summers and moving on to the next. So that's roughly what the schedule could and will look like. Yes. Oh dear. It is. It looks like something happened with the formatting. Yes. So the second 2021 should be 2022, and then it would carry. Yes, correct. And then in addition to those longer period projects, if there are specific smaller renovations or components that we need to address, and it's something where we don't want to interfere with a school year, then there are a series of what could be summer projects over a period of years. Then as we lead into what comes next in terms of the design that will happen and sort of the regulatory review that we're going through now, I wanted to take the opportunity to have the superintendent come up and talk just a little bit about the visioning process and community input that went into the generation of these ideas that ultimately will be design plans and the build out of additions and renovations at the schools. So Superintendent, do you want to say a few words about that process?
All right. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see so many of you here this evening. As we started talking about how we would use this $83 million, there really were two main areas of focus, and I'm sure you'll understand what those two areas are in a second. One is improving health and safety in all 8 of our buildings. So what could be more important than making sure that our buildings are as safe as possible? So all 8 of our buildings will get a whole lot of attention around improving safety in the schools. So that's issue one. And the next thing that we wanted to talk about was how we need to ensure that we are providing our students and staff, but our students with a 21st century education. The truth is, the way that our buildings are currently organized, things really haven't changed a whole heck of a lot in the last 100 years. In fact, I remember a school committee member saying not too long ago that he did not believe that the desks that were in community school 30 years ago are a whole lot different than the desks that are in community school today. So the question is, how do we transform our schools to 21st century schools? What will a school look like? What will be different once we do this work than what they are right now? So I think one of the most important things that we learned, and we did, as Derek mentioned, we had a 2-day visioning session. 45 of our constituents, 11 students from McCourt Middle School, North Cumberland Middle School, and the high school, 11 students, and 7 or 8 parents, and administrators and teachers were involved in this process. It was an intensive 2 days. And our goal was to, at the end of the 2 days together, to come up with a list of things that we really wanted to focus our attention on. What do we want our schools to look like, to be 21st century learning environments? So here are the kinds of things that you all can expect when the work begins and what the final product will be when it's finished. We're looking at creating what we're calling a learning commons. So there will be an area in every single elementary school where there will be what has traditionally been more of a media center, a library configuration. This becomes a little different, where it becomes more of a hub of activity, where there are opportunities for both students and staff to collaborate. So there are more opportunities. So rather than students learning more individually, there are more opportunities for them to collaborate. There are also more opportunities for adults to collaborate. Off of the learning commons are going to be art rooms, music rooms. We're actually thinking about calling them Da Vinci rooms, because we want these rooms to be flexible. We want them to be multi-purpose rooms. We want students, and in fact, the 2 days that we spent together developing this vision, it really was project-based learning. And we talked about that with students. And I got to tell you, if you asked them if they had more of an opportunity to learn like they did during those 2 days, where they were more actively engaged in learning and reading and writing and presenting, it was something that they really enjoyed. So we're looking at providing more project-based learning opportunities for students. Some of you may have heard about buildings, areas of building called makerspace. And it really is essentially that, where students are provided an opportunity to actually create things, make things, where they are actually more involved in deciding what they want to create. So there is definitely more creativity involved. We had an opportunity to visit 2 of the schools in Pawtucket that were totally renovated. And one of the things that struck me when I visited those schools, there were a couple of things. One was the open space that was available to students and staff, and opportunities for them to work together on projects. Another thing that was striking to me was the natural light that was provided with all of the new windows that were put into those buildings. We have buildings, and I would suggest that most of our schools, most of our elementary schools, have windows that are the original windows in the building. So imagine energy efficient windows that are letting in more natural light. And there is a lot of research that supports how exposing students and staff, by the way, exposing students to more natural light improves their learning. Not only does it improve student learning, but it also improves the performance of the adults teaching as well. So there is more being learned about the environmental impact on both teaching and learning. And also, by the way, these things are happening in the workplace as well. So I guess to conclude, before I turned it over to Louis, I guess the thing that I would want everyone to know is that we're looking to provide parity to all of our elementary schools. And I don't want folks to think that work is not going to be done at the middle schools and the high school, because work will be done there. But our initial focus will be on those elementary schools. And you're going to have an opportunity to see in Louis's presentation before and after pictures of what it can be like. So he has pictures of the project that they did in Pawtucket. You'll see the pictures before they did the work and then the pictures that they did after the work, and it really is impressive. And I'm really excited for our students to have the same kinds of opportunities that the students in those two schools that we visited have in Pawtucket. So with that, I will turn it over to Louis, so he can share with you the plans that we've developed for your viewing. Thank you.
It's going to take me a second here to make sure. Okay. Thank you, and good evening, everybody. We're very excited to be here tonight. We're going to show you some examples of projects that we recently completed that illustrate the types of projects that we're going to be doing here in Pawtucket. I also want to mention that not only did we work with Colliers for these projects, but with the exact same team that they're proposing. The first slide that we have was not included in your package. We have handed out to the school committee this package, but I think it illustrates and summarizes the finding of the Cropper report. And it shows one of the benefits of the report is that it breaks down enrollment projections by school building. And so you can actually see what the projected growth is for each one of the elementary schools. The middle schools and the high schools will have very slight growth to the peak projection. This kind of summarizes the process that we go through in designing major projects. So if we look at this column, this lists the peak enrollment projected by Cropper in 2025, which is going to be the peak year of your schools. And it lists the number of students that occupied each building during that peak time. And so then, based on your teacher's contract, we determine the number of students that can be in each classroom and in each building, and then we develop how many tracks we need to be able to house the peak enrollment. And so then this column shows you the proposed tracks for each of the grades. If you notice, we round up in most cases to the number of tracks, but it creates also a little buffer for unexpected students beyond the peak years. So once we have this information, what the Department of Education likes us to do is look at options of how we're going to meet those enrollment projections. We looked at 8 different designs for how to do this. And what we do is that we identify 2 basic types of teaching spaces that we need, the triangles and the squares. The triangles are the size of spaces that you need for a kindergarten or a pre-kindergarten classroom, and the squares are your typical classrooms. So based on your existing facility, we load those spaces with the projected tracks that we're going to need. We also accommodate space for the 21st century learning spaces that the superintendent mentioned. And based on that, we end up with a proposal of certain buildings receiving additions, and this is what you see here. So that you see that Ashton is going to be receiving a classroom addition, Community a cafeteria addition, Garvin a cafeteria addition, and McLaughlin a classroom addition. This really summarizes all of those charts. So what this proposal has is Ashton, which currently has 376 students, will have a design capacity of 399 and a peak enrollment of 414. BF Norton, which currently has 332 students, will have a peak enrollment of 295 and a capacity of 332. By the way, those existing enrollments are listed in this column here. These are the proposed tracks. These are the existing tracks at each building. Community, which currently has 656 students, will have a capacity of 646 and an enrollment of 633. Garvin, which currently has a enrollment of 374, will have an enrollment at the peak time of 408 and a capacity of 429. And then McLaughlin, which currently has an enrollment of 388, will be at a capacity at 429 and peak enrollment at 438. And we can come back to this slide to talk about some other options that are proposed or could be investigated. So I'm going to give you an illustration of the projects that we expect to be realizing as part of this project. Up front and certainly of highest priority is the security issues. Every school will have enhanced security, enhanced vestibule entrances, and protection around the school. This is the slide that illustrates the proposal for the high school. So after the beginning of school, we propose having these sliding gates that create this secured courtyard so that students can circulate between the gymnasium and the high school back and forth. And we will have a new visitor entrance located at this end of the building so that visitors will not commingle with the students as they circulate. So this is some samples of the work that we did at Pawtucket. We have, to a very big extent, health and safety projects. All of the Jacob report items will be addressed as part of our project. Window replacement is one of them. This is the green school, and it shows the new window area. We will also be upgrading restrooms, making sure that they meet ADA requirements. That was a before picture. In the new picture, one of the, I think, nice things that we were able to accomplish is that building code requires you to have sinks inside the bathrooms, but they wanted to have the sinks open up into the corridor, so we created this low wall design which separates the sinks but still meets the building code with that requirement. Before pictures of a classroom space, after pictures of classroom spaces. One of the things that we're doing also in Cumberland is that we are providing the right required spaces for the pre-Ks and Ks classrooms. So this really is what one of the driving forces for the requirement of additions, and that these spaces are about a third larger than traditional classrooms, and so although they hold the same population that you have, require more space. Before pictures of some of the lower level, and this is an art room that we did. This is one of the Da Vinci rooms, and what we do is design these spaces so that can operate as STEAM rooms or art rooms or music rooms, flexible furniture to be able to allow that. We will be providing music rooms. This is a before picture of what was their library. This is the after picture of that. It's a community space. We try to incorporate, and will be incorporating into a media center, some presentation room spaces for students. Another school, this is a before picture of their library media center, the after picture of that school. This is the before picture of cafeterias. We will be actually, we're proposing new cafeterias and renovated cafeterias for some of the elementary schools. So this is the before picture of that. and the after picture of that. It's a really wonderful, flexible space. At the center of this is a performance area, so this shuts off into a stage, and so that could be used for performances too. And some pictures of entrance and corridors that are renovated. So how are we going to convert your schools into 21st century buildings, school buildings? This illustrates what we expect we'll be doing to the elementary schools, in that you have a center corridor, double-loaded corridor with classrooms. This is typical of all your schools. And what we do is that we take some of that space to create the small learning commons. So if you think we create houses for each grade, and at the heart of the house is this living room, if you will, and then family room, and then this is a flexible space for project-based learning and easily accessible from the other classrooms. One of the most important goals of this project is really to end the library as we know it today. We want the Media Center Library to become the heart of every elementary school. We wanted to include project areas. We want it to have in it art components or STEAM components, adjacent to which we'll also have dedicated art rooms and Da Vinci rooms. And this will be a prototype for every one of the elementary schools. It will be the hub and the center for this 21st century learning. We had a wonderful discussion with Wright about this goal today, and we're very excited that this is going to be really a changer to the whole environment of the existing schools. Okay, I should have said. So what you're going to see next is just some diagrams of ideas. They represent the area, the size of spaces that we need, and the adjacency of spaces that we need. You're not going to see any doors or windows. It's just to illustrate how we plan to now discard the layout for the existing buildings. What we have is just that we load them and we know how many spaces we can get in the existing, and that determined the addition and type of addition. So this is Ashton School, and again, we will be renovating all these spaces to create those small communities with learning commons. And then beyond this, we propose an addition which will be really an early childhood center. The proportions of this will change, but it shows you the size of area that we're going to need to accommodate that program. I think it has great opportunity. This is the site and where that proposed addition would go. We expect that we will create a dedicated entrance with some administration control at the entrance, do site work so that we have additional parent parking so that can have easy drop-off and pickup of the pre-Ks and kindergartens. This is community school. And again, we show that we have enough room to accommodate the classrooms that we're proposing with the kindergarten classrooms. But I think the unique part of this project is that looking at various options of how to resolve the cafeteria issue that they have, where they currently have 6 lunch periods. The best option became to add a new addition to provide for a cafeteria, new kitchen. This is a stage for performance. Backed up to that would be a music suite, and then we have other specialized spaces for that. And you can see how that fits on the site. We're investigating the option of turning this area into just the bus drop-off area, creating a new loop for parent parking and also drop-off, so that we envision this becoming a prominent entrance and egress from the building. And then McLaughlin, this is the proposed addition. Again, we show how we comply with all of the sizes that we need and program that we need in the existing building. But this addition will have 3 classrooms, STEAM rooms, and then a large learning commons, which we will be located there. And then we show how that addition fits on that site. We're very excited to be part of the team for this project. We think it will have very positive benefits to an already great school department. And so I think with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Derek.
Great. I'm just going to take this off here. Well, thank you again. It's so great to be here tonight. So I wanted to have take this opportunity to open it up to some questions. I know we received some online, but would love to get some from the room. And between myself, the school department, and the architect, we'll do our best to answer anything you may throw at us. Yes. Sure. So that will get formalized as part of the final meetings with the state in terms of the budgeting and how that looks. We'll give them some preliminary information in November, and then by February it will be fairly well established. We'll get state approvals, and then in May of 2020 that'll be the plan. So really by February of next year we should have a pretty good sense of what the exact schedule and logistics will be. What else? I'm easy. I'll take anything. Yes. Sure. So right now we're looking at the transitions building here on the high school campus. We believe it to be ideal because it is separated from the rest of the campus. So and we got a fair number of questions about this online as well. It really provides the opportunity for us to use existing space to minimize costs for essentially temporary positioning of folks, and we're able to keep the younger children completely separated from the high school operations. Yep. I suppose to a good degree it will be budget dependent. I think the rooms can fairly easily be refit out with different furniture and those sorts of things, and the physical spaces should work fairly well. We want to be really careful about focusing investment on end state and kind of the elementary schools and renovations to the middle and high, as opposed to putting a lot of financial resources into a temporary condition. Yes. So I've not done a faculty and student one-for-one placement over, and I think that will require some additional study. But I do think, depending upon the sequencing, and this is part of the logistics planning, it may be that there are opportunities to house students in a variety of different campuses within the elementary portfolio, knowing that everyone during that relocation year will be slightly inconvenienced by being relocated, but that's kind of what will come out of the study and be formalized for February. Yeah, sure. Yep. Yeah, I think that's a great question. So the working group with the superintendent have had a number of discussions about the idea of parity, and really what I mean by that is that all students, no matter what school they are in, have the same experience. And so we had looked at a number of different options to look at where classrooms would go and how that would work best within the district. As this plan currently exists, there may be some redistricting, but it's minimized, and I think for Cumberland, that's probably the right thing to do. But we are really looking at the other schools to make sure they have equal spaces, that there is balance, so that the numbers are what they are, and the sizing won't change a great deal under this proposal. But there's absolutely a focus in making sure no matter which elementary school you go to, academic achievement is high, the spaces are similar, and everyone has equal investment in their experience. Yes.
Yes, I have a major concern in reference to security. You mentioned the new additions and the formidable, more open class space, doors, security. Could you elaborate on these mechanisms, as far as security for our children?
Yeah, sure.
In the classroom, glasses, the doors, are they going to be, give us a descriptive view of?
Absolutely. I'm going
Thank
to
you.
try, and it's a great question because it's definitely on everyone's mind in every district we work with. So obviously the classroom security protocols are pretty unchanged. The major things that we see with some of these spaces that we just talked about, and also the user experience in a school in general, has changed in a couple of ways and will be implemented here. One of which is kind of entry and exit is typically a lot more formal. So making sure that there are secure entrances where these buildings all still feel like warm and welcoming schools, because really that's what they are first and foremost, but that we're providing a safe and controlled entry pathway for visitors during the day. So that absolutely will happen, and you'll see some improvements around that. Then I think what the superintendent and the architect were talking about in terms of classrooms clustered around more open spaces, typically, those more open spaces have doors at either end so that you can close off components within a school. Also, the school department will be working and is required to file security plans with the state every year, and that'll talk about what to do in emergency situations, what evacuation looks like. So that is definitely a very serious topic, and will be fully considered in any plan that gets proposed. Does that help? Or Yep. Sure. So I guess what I'll say for this evening is that will get reviewed with local police and fire. Generally, schools are following ALICE protocols, but there's some disagreement in terms of the level of hardening to keep people out versus letting people who are in escape. And so that'll be considered, but things that we've seen hardening of walls, some film on glass to slow down entry time. So there's a number of things we can do, but it ends up being very specific to the space and how it's essentially seated and addresses the site, addresses people that would be approaching from outside. Sure.
Hi, I just had a question about how much consideration has been given to the instructional impact to the students at the high school. I know you talked about it being an ideal, the transitional building, which I'm a Cumberland resident, but I also teach in the transitional building.
Sure.
And the main building at the high school, as everyone knows, is already pretty full.
Yep.
And we're talking about really crowded hallways and teachers, not for 1 year, like the elementary school teachers, to be inconvenienced, but for a prolonged period of time, that the culture that we've worked so hard to build at the high school will be substantially impacted. What kind of consideration has been given to how it will impact the instruction for the high school students?
Sure,
To
yeah, no-
be packed into that main building?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I guess I will give you a half answer, but to commit to continue to looking at that. So I think there's absolutely an understanding that all students, right, need to be respected, and the curriculum that's being delivered needs to be unimpacted or minimally impacted. I think it's going to require really tight coordination with your curriculum director, superintendent and assistant superintendent, in terms of scheduling, looking at room assignments, making sure that we have a workable solution, because you're right, it is a prolonged period in terms of how the high school will experience this change. But we certainly haven't forgotten the students or the faculty at the high school. And as we get further along, I think we'll be able to better answer what's, especially from a teacher's perspective who's going to be living in the school, what that'll look like day to day. Because yes, you're right, that is an important consideration. Of course.
So I had a similar question, and if I'm hearing you correctly, it almost sounds like that work hasn't been done as far as effects of classes. So if we're expecting, for instance, classes that may not be 25, 30 students, we may expect the high school to carry classes that have a larger class size in order to squeeze them all into the high school, which therefore, I believe, would reduce the number of classes that would be offered to high school students.
So to the best of my knowledge, that is not on the table, and the superintendent will correct me if I'm wrong.
So we, we anticipated that there would be some concern about having all of the high school teachers, especially those who are currently in the trans building, move over to the high school, the building that we're in right now. The truth is that there is more than enough space in this building to accommodate all of the teachers. It is a fact that the high school is space-wise being underutilized. So the point is that during the course of the day, we're not utilizing all of the space that is available to us as efficiently as we could. So we have spent a lot of time talking about this and investigating this. There is enough space here to accommodate all of the teachers and all of the students that are currently being housed in the trans building. It will have no effect on class size. It will have no effect on the course offerings that students currently have available to them. So the only difference may be, so rather than, if I'm an English teacher and I'm teaching in the trans building today, I understand that it's going to be a little inconvenient because I'm not going to have my own room for a while. But if I'm a teacher teaching English or math or science or social studies currently in the trans, then I'm going to be the same teacher who is teaching a class of students in this building. So we understand that ideally we wouldn't, have to use that space, but we're in a position where we need to find a place to house each of the elementary school populations over the course of a year to accommodate the work that is going to be done in their building. So it is going to be an inconvenience for those folks who currently have their own room. But let me give you an example. I had to have a conversation today with the high school administration, and I was just curious. As I walked over, it was approximately 9 o'clock or so, maybe a little bit earlier, and there were at least 10 classrooms that were not being utilized at that particular point in time. So the point I'm trying to make is that we're going to utilize that space efficiently. There is enough space in the high school to accommodate during this time of transition, during this time when we're doing all of this work on the elementary schools to effectively house the elementary schools students who are going to be here temporarily and not create a huge disadvantage for the teaching and learning that is currently taking place here.
I have a couple questions. I'm not sure who would have to answer them. One came up on Facebook about a safe playground area for the elementary schools while they're here. Any thought as to where that would be?
Yeah, sure. So I think we will try and locate something near the transitions building. That actually came up in our meeting with the state this morning, and we were asked to explore that further. So I'm not ready to give you a picture of what it looks like yet, but it is definitely on the current thinking in terms of making sure that we have appropriate recreation spaces for all the students that will be moving through.
Okay. Second would be busing. We're currently in the Ashton district, and we live down the street. So we want to make sure, busing-wise, I know that's probably not you.
Yeah, I
Would we
can't
still be
answer
covered under
transportation
busing because there are
questions.
no sidewalks?
Are we in a position where we can answer? So I think still being studied, and continue to ask if it makes sense, because obviously we
So-
need to have plans for all of this.
I know it's not you, but
Yes.
so Ashton is a full busing district because there's no sidewalks on Scott Road, and there's no sidewalks on Farm or any of the side roads. So
Okay.
third, back to Ashton. It's not, the picture is not very clear back here. So it looks like the addition adds 2 preschool classrooms and 1 kindergarten classroom, but do all the other grades stay 2 classrooms per grade?
Yes, and Ashton is primarily a 2-track school in this plan.
Correct. However, we have kids that are sent out of district because we don't have room for them. And then how do 3 kindergarten classrooms fit into 2 classrooms for the rest of the grades? And also, I'm wondering, sorry.
Sure, no, that's okay.
When they did the whole study as to the growth of everything, there's a bunch of developments all within the current Ashton district, and it's going to add a ton of children to the Ashton district. And I do realize that they're talking about possibly redistricting.
Yep.
But we already send children out of district with 2-track, and I just don't understand how 3 kindergartners go into 2 first-grade classes without being at max capacity, which is what we currently are at, 24 kids per class, 23 kids per class.
Okay, so I'm likely going to need architectural support on some of those questions. So let's start with that, and then I'll try and pick up anything that it remains.
I'm glad I finally needed. I thought you were going to handle it all. So the issue starts with having to have 15K classrooms, and how are they distributed? We have one additional than the 2 tracks at Ashton, because to put them in other areas would have required another addition, and it is economically beneficial to group your additions together. And this early childhood center is going to be an amazing place to be in. It's going to be focused for that age group, and so we thought that the best place to add that additional K that we needed to have would be at the Ashton School.
So my question is, what happens when they go to first grade? Do they stay at Ashton, or do now all those kindergarten classes get dispersed to other schools?
I think that's something that will need to be further investigated, exactly what happens to that. But if you can see, the same would happen if we added that pre-K, that K at other schools. So and we can further investigate that, but it just makes sense that we do it in what's going to be the new early childhood center to have that additional capacity.
No, so I do understand that, but currently Ashton is at max capacity with kids going out of district. So keeping it, and I realize this may not be, but keeping it at a 2-track school, adding 2 pre-Ks, and then now kindergarten, so they go to kindergarten at Ashton and then they go to another school, that doesn't, so they're already going to their first year now, they go to another school from 1st through 5th.
I can just say that it is not unusual that that happens. Communities that have early childhood centers have that happen. All of the pre-Ks will be going to other schools.
I mean, your point is well taken, and there seems to be some confusion here, and it may be some confusion on our part, but one of the things that we talked about is the expectation that students who are living in the Ashton homeschool community, homeschool area, there needs to be enough space for those kids to go to school at Ashton. So I think that's your question, right? So the question is, do we have enough space at Ashton to accommodate all of the students who live in the Ashton Community School District? And we have a responsibility to make sure that there is space for all of the Ashton kids to go to Ashton Elementary School. So we need to make sure that we get that resolved. And the reason for that is, you know, as Louis mentioned, it is much of the decisions that have been made are based on these demographic studies. So we actually have two sources of data. One is from an organization called Cropper, who they have a great reputation. The Department of Education actually required that we use Cropper to do this demographic study, and it is they consider all of these variables in making decisions about what the population, student population is going to be in that particular home school area over the next 10 years. And they're amazingly accurate. But we also talked about your point about these developments. One of the variables that Cropper considers when they provide these projections is just that, the potential influx of school-age children in these homeschool areas. So all of those things were considered in the demographic study, but I do think the most important point for me as the superintendent is if a child is living in the Ashton School, community school area, then that child needs to go to the Ashton Community School. So we need to make sure that that is crystal clear for everyone.
I want to ask some questions that came off Facebook for you guys as well. And the first one was from Kelly Martin Rodriguez. I'd like to see them redistrict the schools again. She says, we moved to Cumberland knowing Ashton was our school, but the redistricting put us at Garvin. Will they be something they would be looking at to change, which we've said you're going to be going back to your home school if you're in Ashton.
Mm-hmm.
One question from Ashley Ann. I heard BF is getting a fourth floor.
That is false.
Not true. How can they close elementary schools? There's more families moving in with little children. We need all the schools we can have.
We're not closing any elementary schools.
Right. My concern about this is that the high school actually needs more space than the trans.
No, that is not true.
I'm not familiar with the campus, but is the transitional building near the rest of the high school? How close are the elementary students going to be to the high school students? Will the classrooms be age appropriate, especially for the kindergarten students? As a parent of a second grader and a kindergarten student next year, this makes me quite nervous.
Okay, so certainly, you know, I'm a grandparent that has elementary. I know I don't look it, but grandparent that has elementary aged grandchildren. I can understand how that would be a concern, but the beauty of the trans building is that it is totally separate from the high school, and there will be, given the start time of the high school and the end of school time for the high school and the start time and end time for the elementary schools, there will never really be a time where they will be in a position where they can interact with one another. So high school students will be self-contained here. Elementary school students will be self-contained at the in the trans building during that period of
All
time.
right, another question was, will there be an impact to Alpha Best since they operate out of the elementary schools?
You know, that's a great question. Mike Kenyon is here, who works for Alpha Best. I don't know.
I think what we'll need to do is, what we'll need to do is basically work with our licensing folks and have them get licensing together for us for the transitional building. Once we get that, we'll be all set, because when the next school is being worked on, we still have them at the transitional building, so there'll be no need to do another license. So we'll be working together just to make that happen.
All right,
So I know that with community, you're not allowed to have anyone, sorry, you're not allowed to do AlphaBest underground, and I've been in the transitional building, and that big room that they have that would be available for AlphaBest is underground.
So what we'll do is we will work with the administration and this team to look at what rooms will be licensed, so in order to make the capacity for AlphaBest.
To go with that, one of my concerns with childcare is the timeline that families will be informed. Actually, with all of this, the timelines that families will be informed, because last time there was a huge change. We found out 2 weeks before school started that kids were getting out early on a Wednesday. And luckily, AlphaBest stepped right up and was like, people can come on Wednesdays and only sign up for Wednesdays. And that was great, but it definitely sent families into a panic. So I don't want that repeated, where all of a sudden 2 weeks when we get our classroom assignments is when we start finding out everything. So I guess mine is more of a concern, not a question.
I'm going to lean on the superintendent in case I get this wrong, but I think in terms of the broader changes, there is significant notification time required, so that shouldn't be happening.
And just to piggyback on what Derek just said, one of the things that we recognize and has been a part of our conversation with all of our meetings with both Torado and with Colliers, one of the things that we talked about was how important communication is. So we know that that's a priority. We know that, you know, it's going to be a little unsettled for a while. I mean, we're doing $83 million worth of work in this district. I mean, it's going to pay off. It's going to take some time for us to get there, but we understand the importance of communicating with families so that they understand clearly, you know, what's going to happen during each phase of the project, and especially those families who are going to be most affected when their school is being worked on. So we'll make sure we're on top of that.
I'm not familiar with the transitional building, but is there a space for the kids to have like a gym class and specials there that?
There is in the transition building a cafeteria, there is a gymnasium, and the thing that we're having conversations about is we know that students need to get outside and play, so I guess that would be one of the things that we're thinking about now is where would that place be?
How are we supposed to have evacuation drills and fire drills if we're not allowed to have direct interactions with the elementary schools?
I think that, you know, that's a really good question. I think that there are going to be things that there are going to be things that come up just like that. That's a great example that we're going to have to figure out. So, you know, we'll get it figured out. And this is the thing that I think everyone understands is that, you know, Colliers and Torado architects, this is what they do, and they're really good problem solvers when it comes to dealing with those kinds of things based on their rather extensive experience in working with schools. So we realize that we have a responsibility to, you know, make sure that parents are comfortable with the decisions that we make, and I think the best way to deal with that is to make sure that we are communicating well. And anytime a question like that comes up that we haven't thought about yet, we need to make sure that, you know, we have answers to those questions.
Just to get you thinking, in line with the other direct access question to the elementary students, as an AP student, we take exams at the beginning of May for 2 weeks all day, and those are usually held in the trans building, in the trans gymnasium / cafeteria, and we were just wondering if you had any ideas about that.
Not yet. Good for you for being an AP student. You know, we understand our responsibility to expose students to the technology that is ever-changing. So, you know, that is something that we're going to, you know, have to consider when we do this work. You know, I know that it seems like the technology is changing every couple of years, and we have a, you know, we have to respond accordingly to that as best we can under the budget. Mm-hmm. You mean like somehow connect with, yeah, I think, I mean, certainly, you know, our IT guy, Mike, is as talented a person as there is with that sort of thing. I'm sure that we can create those kinds of opportunities. And I think being a 21st century, creating a 21st century learning environment, part of creating an environment like that is to expose students to those kinds of opportunities, right? So you probably have heard of these opportunities for students, you know, in this country who have a sister or brother school in China. We could do the same thing with colleagues in other districts. So, I mean, your point is well taken. I think that's the sort of thing we could probably be doing now. Yeah.
My question deals with the high school activities after school because it's going to overlap with the release time and while the elementary students are still there. And how is that going to impact like sports because you have different teams, you have different people coming up, the parking. If you have the busing, how are you going, is that going to require more security measures? Is that going to be an added cost? And also just that safety component with people that aren't Cumberland High School or students or, you know, parents, and then you have other districts coming in while you still have the elementary kids here as well.
You know, one of the things that we talked about doing, see, that's a good question, and we're getting some questions that, you know, we, at least I can, speaking for myself, other than the ones that I saw online that we hadn't considered. So one of the things that we're thinking about doing is creating like an FAQ place for folks to, you know, on the district website where people can ask questions like that, and it would give us an opportunity to think about how we're going to respond. So these are, you know, it's helpful for us to hear you this evening because it will provide us an opportunity to respond to some of these things that we haven't considered yet. And we're just, don't forget, we're just really like getting into the nitty-gritty here of planning all of this.
With redistricting being considered as part of this, how would the timing of that work with the renovations? Is there the possibility that a child is displaced for 1 year and then redistricted to another school and then displaced for a second year?
I guess certainly the goal would be for us to minimize something like that. And again, I don't want to suggest that, you know, something like that would never happen. But certainly we would want to not put a child or a family in a position where they're going to be bouncing around from school to school over a period of years. So again, I think our challenge is to minimize, we need to accommodate students that are living in each of our homeschool areas. We have a responsibility to do that. And I think if we do redistrict some students, I think, you know, if we can minimize the number of students that we redistrict, that would be probably the best thing that we could do.
Hi, I was just
Hi.
wondering if there was going to be any construction on the trans building prior to all this, just because I think of my 6-year-old niece who's very tiny and I would have to lift her onto the toilets. Are they going to get smaller toilets, smaller sinks to accommodate all like the kindergarten, first graders for that?
We expect to do that. So we certainly need to do that type of work. We need to make sure that we provide ADA accessible fixtures for all the smaller students. We also plan to renovate the old shower rooms which are not utilized, so that could be additional space that's utilized for the swing space.
I was wondering why the students weren't directly informed about this event, because I believe that if they were, then we would all be able, as a school, get an optimal strategy for the mapping of the trans building.
So I guess, and tell me if I'm not understanding this right, but from my perspective, I think this is really the beginning of the next communication campaign in terms of us being able to talk to all of you, both community members and students. So the way I heard that was you want to be involved so that you're feeling like you're being heard in terms of how we're mapping this out, and I think there's a commitment that we will make that possible. I know that there was a lot of public information leading into the referendum, and then between then and now, we've really been working hard on getting some of the initial planning done. But coming up here pretty soon, we're ready to have the kind of the next round of discussions and talking to both students and the community about what this is going to look like for everybody. Is that fair?
I want to thank you for addressing the concerns about course offerings and class size, but I want to just return to the question about how much planning or consideration has been given to the effect that this will have on instruction at the high school. Because when you have that many teachers without a home base, I think it will have a direct impact. You're losing instructional minutes every class period, every day, every teacher. As the teacher comes into a room, gets set up, you're talking about what we know to be best practice, do-nows, exit tickets, seating arrangements in a classroom, greeting students at the door, making those personal connections with them. That becomes really increasingly difficult. So how much thought and what plans do you have to make those kinds of things sustainable in terms of the instruction, not just the physical classroom space, but the impact on instruction? Because again, it's not 1 year, it's 5 years. You're talking about the span of some of these kids' entire high school career. How much consideration has been given to that?
Do you want to start and I'll follow up, or do you want me to start? Do you want to start and I'll follow up, or I'll start?
Sarah, I hear your concern, but I want to be crystal clear. I do not believe for a second that instruction will be impacted at all. So we can respectfully disagree, right? And we clearly do, but I do not believe that where a teacher teaches will have a significant, a negative impact on their performance. We can respectfully disagree. So I don't see that happening.
just a select group? As well as, will there also, has it not on the instructional time, but also on the morale of the staff here? Because that, it's a big, you know, it's a 5-year commitment for the high school staff.
I just want to quickly offer kind of one idea, and then I'll certainly let the superintendent respond, because some of that I can't address directly. But as a general principle, and we see this in any major renovation project that we do, there will be incidents of hopefully very short-term pain in terms of things that folks have to deal with and come to the table with us as part of this process. But on the back end of that, the investment that you're making and what you'll receive on the other side is so worth it. And it's hard to see now at the beginning when we're talking about leading into it. But to see what it looks on the other side is always such a really powerful experience. So I'll let the superintendent talk a little bit more about kind of direct impact, because he lives it here with you all day to day. But I would offer that, yes, construction isn't as though we aren't there, because we are in fact there. But you're making an investment in the future for all of your students. And so I just encourage you to think about that a little bit, maybe.
Mr. Costa, I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you want to respond to the concern about space?
Hello, everyone. So definitely, there is always going to be a concern about crowded hallways, you know, areas of the school that might be impacted when we're transitioning from class to class. Last year, both last year and this year, I did an analysis of our schedule. I did this in preparation for this conversation last year, and I've already done it again this year, where I take the number of classes in session in the transitional building, and I look to see how many classes are open in the high school. So for example, during our period 1 this year, there are 13 classes in session in the transitional building. There are 18 open classes in the high school, excluding any computer class and any art class. So there is plenty of classroom space available. Last year, I was also privileged enough to go visit Adlai Stevenson High School, one of the top performing high schools in the whole country, and no teacher has a classroom in that building. They do have home bases where teachers have desks, they have file cabinets, they have areas where they go when they're not utilizing the classroom, and then they're scheduled into classes. Barrington High School, teachers do not have classrooms, so we're not setting a precedence here. This is being done in other districts. This has been done around the country. I think for the short time, the way we would have to look at it is almost like a college campus where teachers have offices and buildings are, and classrooms are scheduled for teachers. But there are other alternatives. I have begun to talk about it with my academic council made up of each department head. And they're bringing their, this is what I think I should do. And even for each one of them, and it's a group made up of 9 different people, each one of them has a different plan. So this, whatever's decided for scheduling at the high school, it's definitely going to be an emotional decision. As a teacher for 12 years, I loved my classroom. I coveted the classroom I ended up with before I left teaching, so I understand it. But I think the benefits way outweigh the, you know, the discomfort we might have for a short time.
I just want to address the high school concerns as the chair of the Achievement Subcommittee. I actually think that this is a big responsibility to make sure that achievement is not impacted. And so when we talk about instruction and how this will all work, so I'm just making a commitment with the Achievement Subcommittee to all of you to say that we will make sure that we're working closely and fully understanding what this whole high school transition plan will be, because it's 5 years, and just as you stated, and we have to be clear that that's not having an impact. Clearly, we don't have all the answers tonight, But this is something that, I commit to taking on and helping to make sure we get to a good place on this. But I have lots of ideas of how we could do this, but I just wanted to let you know that. So I don't think we have any other answers tonight around the impact to the high school, but we will continue to do a lot of work on that.
Thank you. Yes, this would be for the contractor. I'm a state representative. I have a vested interest, okay, in reference to the structural integrity of all these new additions and the renovations you're going to be making. Unlike the previous bonds we've had, okay, which we went into cost overruns, okay, bathrooms that went, big major problems. Can you elaborate on structural integrity? Can you elaborate on lifespans of these new additions? Are you at liberty to do that?
Yeah, to a degree, and I think it's a great question. It's a bit early in the process, but I want to address it big picture because I think it becomes so important. So as part of the push to make this investment in schools throughout the state, one of the changes to state law was that all districts will have an owner's project manager. So that's in fact what Colliers are. So we're not actually going to be the builder, but we in fact are representing you through the entire process. And that includes everything from overall schedule and budget management to quality control. So yes, we will be the people that will hold your vendors accountable to make sure all of that does happen. Because construction is a few years out, it's difficult for me to comment on anything specifically. But the state is committed to making sure that there's accountability, and so are we at Colliers. Sure. Yes. Where's the clicker? Not yet. So the schedules are very preliminary, and I do apologize about the formula. But what we're doing, similar to the commentary about redistricting and sort of minimizing pain and trying to be respectful to all of the students, there is significant focus, and I mentioned this I think a little bit at the beginning, about making sure that all the schools at the end provide a similar experience. And that in fact was much of what we talked about this morning with the state in terms of after we're done with these additions and renovations, what are sort of the baseline values that all of these schools will stick to, and what does that mean spatially? So the numbers will come, but the goal is that no matter which building you're in, you'll have a similar experience. So it certainly won't all change at this point, but we are still finishing the setting of the big picture. So the first step was the initial commitment and going to voters and talking about what broadly this would look like, and so that has passed. Now we're really working with the state to see what that looks like on paper in terms of what schools need to receive what, how that works with the student population and where they live, and then what the end experience will be with the money provided. And so while we try and be very good listeners and we'll take as much feedback as we can, a complete change and disregard to the general approach is probably not possible at this point, but tweaks certainly are. I know you saw the architect's presentation, and the floor plans are still very much diagrammatic, so there is a lot of room for refinement and making sure that decisions are well informed and are respectful of the group that will be leading the process. Sure. So I think Lewis mentioned it from Toronto Architects, but fortunately, in my opinion, you have the same team. So Colliers was the OPM in Pawtucket, and we are still working there today. Toronto was the architect on those two transitions at Potter Burns and Nathaniel Green. So the team has a lot of experience working with each other and bringing contractors along through the process. In terms of costing, things have shifted in terms of market dynamics, but we are good about holding to a line and honoring our commitments. And I think you'll find if you talk to Pawtucket residents or the administration that those projects were incredibly successful, celebrated when they were opened on time. All schools were able to open on time with the beginning of school calendar years. So we're really setting you up for the same thing. We'll see how the numbers play out as we determine, what the final decisions are in terms of the renovation scope and scale. But we're starting from a very solid position. Yeah.
Hello.
So
What was the question?
yeah.
We need to approve this next week so that Toronto and Colliers can go back to RIDE for preliminary approval in November. They want to see what the school department is planning on doing. They were there today at RIDE as well today. RIDE has a very big vested interest in this. We were going to go into submit in February, and RIDE turned around and said we need to do it in November. So we need to get going to submit this. The architect, Toronto, needs time. He needs time to do drawings. Colliers needs time to review everything. They need to go out to cost estimators to make sure we understand the cost. We got to give it to the building committee because they're going to manage this for the next 5 years as far as the building aspect of it, dealing with the bidders and the plans and everything else. But we're in a very tight timeline now because they changed it from February to November. Changes can always be made. I mean, the building committee may say, this doesn't work, we have to do this. I mean, there still has to be collaboration from the school committee to the building committee with our vision, and then the building committee will execute it. When I...
If we approve this and it gets submitted to RIDE,
So what we're asking you to do in the next week is approve it in concept so that we can execute against this plan. It will become fairly formally cast where we have rigid numbers. Those numbers start to get tighter leading into November. By February, it's a fairly rigid plan. And then in May, the Council of Elementary and Secondary Education approves it, and then it's sort of a lock. So there is some time, but in order to do all of that prep work and take it from diagrams to things that start to look like they could actually eventually be buildable, it's a bit of a tight crunch between now and November to work toward that. That's the total approved by the voters. No. Nothing says we have to, but we have the ability to if that's the will of the district. Based on what is being proposed, I do think you will, and I do think it makes sense to. You have a great opportunity to receive substantially more money from the state than you ever will again, likely within kind of this generation of students that'll go through. So likely that will be the number. It can't go up because that, yep.
Well, I just want to address that because I had a meeting the other day, the mayor brought that up as well. That, you know, he wants to make sure we don't get to year 4 and 5 and we've run out of money. So this group of people, the architect and colliers, they need to be very mindful of that because there's other work we want to do at the middle schools with the security, with science labs and so forth. So the mayor brought it up just last week because, you know, we have to be careful about how we spend it. We can't just keep on saying, oh, let's add this on now and add that on. We got to get to the basics first, and then we'll move on from there. And that's where the building committee comes in and helps us manage everything that happens here. I was on the 2010 project with Counselor here in the room, and you know, we didn't spend the whole thing that the Mayor McKee at the time had, you know, said we would spend. There was a $30 million. We didn't spend it all. Got close to it. We probably should have and did some more in the wellness center with the track, but you know, we don't know what it's going to be. The $83 million came about because we took the state commissioned a company called Jacobs, and they went to every school district in the state, walked through every building, threw a number, pie in the sky number, and come up with a number for the governor in regards to her plan to do this. Toronto took our stage 1 and stage 2 numbers that we've known from 2015 because we have to give RIDE a 5-year projection of what we need for repairs in our school district, and which we've been working on, and we matched the two together. And where they said a bubbler costs $3,000, we bought them for $900 from Granger. So that's how we got to the $83 million, the number. And that took probably a good month of meeting almost every week and going through numbers. We had Mr. Chandler, myself, the architects, his people, because they do this day in and day out. They know the value of what they just spent in Pawtucket to do things. And so, you know, there's nothing says we have to spend the $83 million. I mean, we're hoping, and Councilor Schmidt is here, you know, our reimbursement right now, he showed 45. Our bond that referendum said 50. We're proposing that we go for 65% with all the bonuses that RIDE is offering to give us. And these guys, 2 guys here, know that we want to get to the 65% reimbursement because that maximizes how much work we can do in the district. If we get to 50, you know, it's going to be a killer. And so when we go to RIDE, we have to be ready. And they've looked at our stuff preliminary a couple of times and, you know, like the ideas, like the concepts, but we need to get it down to the nitty-gritty now. You know, there's nothing saying the town has to worry about how can they afford it first. I mean, we just can't go borrow $83 million. I mean, we're looking to borrow about $29 million, and RIDE will give us an $8 million up front to start the project to get it going. And so we have to be very careful. I mean, the town can't bankrupt the school. The school can't bankrupt the town over this. Just, we have to be smart about it. And I know Mayor Mutter's here, and he's got the finances for this town down to a nickel. So we'll get it done.
Hi, can we flip to the enrollment slide? I have a couple of questions. Yep, the other one, yeah. Oh. So my first question is around the size of community school, and I know, Mr. Mitchell, you had mentioned about how kids should go back to their home school in their neighborhood. And we have a tremendous amount of kids in the Cumberland Hill area that are currently going to community school. I feel like at this point we have a real opportunity for some transformation in this town. And I would like to seriously consider reducing the size of community school. But my second question really is around Ashton School and the Cumberland Hill McLaughlin School. If you could just speak to what seems to be an anomaly for me. I'm not sure, but I'm sure, Mr. Trotter, you can speak to this. The expected enrollment is higher than the anticipated capacity. Can you talk to how you determine that that's okay to do?
Yes. First, I just want to mention that what we're looking for is an approval from the committee and the building committee for the direction of the project. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've looked at 8 different options. We would like to narrow down to the best proposal and then do a lot of investigations, including your question, including all of the questions that have been brought up about the high school. So really, this is the beginning of the beginning, and we'll have the ability to address in detail all of the issues that have been brought up once we're really given the go-ahead to, yes, this is your proposal seems to make sense, why don't you go forward and investigate it? And it's the beginning not only at this stage, but also for the right approval process. So that's one of the things we're going to be.
Hello? Yes. I have a question. Do you have a question? No? Okay. All right. Whew. In terms of the project schedule, there seems to be a little clarification needed. According to the project schedule that you posted, construction on the first school wouldn't start till the end of the 2021 school year. Is that accurate, or will it start next school year?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So likely not. In terms of the lead-in time, this is likely pretty accurate unless we find a shorter duration or summer project that we want to get done. And the reason I say that is so we come through the state approvals, which really end in May of 2020, and we rely on that state approval to then start design that will lead into construction. And depending upon the size and scale of those first projects out of the gate, which could be fairly significant, it is true that we may not see sort of major movement till 2021. That's correct. There is a fair amount of ramp-up time.
And just one more question.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, sure. So really what that starts to look at is if you look at the green that precedes that just a bit. So we're talking about a bidding and a buyout process over the winter. And when you begin construction, many of the first things often don't involve shovels in the ground. So you begin kind of reviewing the list of things that are about to be purchased, getting contracts in order. So it is technically part of the construction window, but physical construction likely wouldn't be that disjointed against a school calendar.
Okay. Yes. Am I the only one speaking? Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the aerials that you showed with the graphic of the proposed school over, I saw that those were dated November of last year. So what level of design, I know you said it was still not much design had been done, but what percentage of the design has been done for those schools?
So we're really not even at.
So you're at conceptual.
Yeah, it's
still.
conceptual.
Okay.
We're the coming out of the May approval is round 1 of schematic design. So this really is diagrammatic and concept. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Yeah.
So do each one of these bars represent construction at one school?
Yeah, so what this starts to look at is we could potentially consider 4 long projects running kind of one right after the other, and so that's the intent. There's nothing to say that we couldn't try and compress depending upon project sizes and run faster, but then it starts to be that conversation about the transition building and temporary housing depending upon the number of people we need to displace. So right now these bars are per project, basically.
But each project is one school?
Potentially.
So
Yep.
I think there's 5 schools and 4 bars, and I guess that would be my concern.
Right, and so at some point, we may need to run 2 schools along 1 bar, but we need to make sure we're far enough in the calendar that we've opened enough classroom space to house everybody.
Okay, yeah, so you would expect that potentially over a couple of months, there could be double the amount of
Yeah,
students
there
in the
may be
transitional
some
building?
overlap or even a parallel build. And so that's really part of that phasing study that gets finalized between now and really when it's signed off on in May next year.
All right, so, we have a question.
Two more. Do you know the count? Yeah.
What was the question?
20. Approximately 20 is the number I'm being told.
You have a school that currently has 30 classrooms. How is that?
Right, and so in that case, we'd need to position that school in 2 buildings. So we'd house 2 capacity at Trans, and then move the rest to likely one of the other buildings. And that question came up too with the build at Community, and so that's still being studied. Yes. Okay, so in terms of starting with the numbers and the big picture idea, so the numbers are coming. We don't have them yet, but we certainly will in time. And in terms of the overall concept, it's really to move away from purely just instructional spaces where teachers are dictating to a classroom, and provide spaces that are a little bit more flexible. So an awful lot of the visioning that the superintendent and staff had gone through talk about using spaces differently, making spaces that are easier to be moved and adaptable, creating some common spaces so that students can experience education within the classroom, but then with their peers from other classes out in common areas. So the focus is really about making sure that the spaces that are in these buildings at the end are more appropriate in terms of instructional styles and curriculum that's trying to be delivered. So media centers are a focus, and kind of what the new look of a library is. Multi-purpose spaces that can be art 1 minute and science the next, and maybe a language program another. So those are the types of concepts in terms of what we're trying to do is really continue to, and I mentioned this in the very beginning, take what is a strong foundation in terms of academic success here in Cumberland and continue to elevate that and make those investments. But I'm going to pass it over to the superintendent. Yes.
So I said it earlier, so as the chair of the Achievement School Committee and my daughter's class of 2022 and my son's class of 2020, and there are at least 4 of us that have all kids who are graduating up till 2025. So we hear you, and we are going to take the responsibility to make sure that the questions are being addressed and that all of our kids, and we are fully invested in this, have the same academic experience. So while we don't have all the answers tonight, and I know you questioned Mr. Mitchell, I just want to let you know you elect us too to help make sure that we do what we should be doing. So I can't say any more because I just saw this plane yesterday. So I don't have any advanced knowledge either, but I've got a whole page of notes of things that we need to keep working on. So I'm with you.
Yeah, no, questions are welcome. I mean, I don't think we have it. I don't know that the superintendent or I could answer that now in terms of temporary swing space. We have the general concept down, but it gets refined over the next couple of months.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I hope you can answer. We're spending a lot of money, right? Over $80 million, and we expect this to change the school department or school system, for a long time. Do we have any enrollment projections for BVP and how they're going to grow, and if they're going to grow, and how they might affect enrollment in the district? Because I'd hate to see us spend all this money and then have BVP double in size and have to close a school. One more question.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think I can answer that. I think the enrollment for BVP is restricted to 50 students a year on Cumberland.
Yeah, I guess my concern is BVP could go to the state and get permission to expand, and we would have no say as a town.
Bill, I think that's a great question. I would look at this in a couple of different ways. One of the things that we have talked about is, first of all, one of the things that we should feel good about as a district is that the academic performance of our students is increasing. And we are outperforming, it's not a contest, but we're outperforming a lot of districts and school systems. And one of the things that we have talked at length about is the hope that by doing this work at the elementary schools, that some of those folks who, and who knows if this will happen or not, but some of those folks who, have an interest in sending their children to the charter school might reconsider, given the beauty of what these schools are going to be like when the work is done, that they will want their children to attend what has become high-performing elementary schools.
I think that would be great. I guess I just wonder if we should have a discussion with BVP or the state about this before we write the check.
I think that's one of those things that we need to put on the list to consider. You can.
Oh, my last question is sort of what's the end state of the transitional building? Because it doesn't sound like we need it. Right? If we can move all the kids out of there and actually have another school in there, what are we going to do with it when this is done?
Great question. So one of the things that we have talked about, and this is a part of the plan, is, as I mentioned, that we are not utilizing all of the capacity at the high school. That is a fact, whether people want to believe that or not. And one of the things that we are planning to do is, because we are focusing a lot of attention, and appropriately so, on pathways, that we would be using space in the trans building to accommodate all of our work on these CTE pathways. Can I just say one thing, Mr. Chairman? First of all, this is helpful, having these questions, and as I mentioned, and I'm sure that the Collier's reps and the reps from Toronto, the architectural reps who do this work, have more experience with this. But I can readily admit that you all brought up some questions that I personally had not considered, and that's a good thing. So we know that more questions are going to come up that we did not anticipate. And when you consider the sheer volume of work that has to be done, all 8 schools are going to be impacted by the work that's going to be done with this $83 million that has been appropriated to us. So, it's a pretty monumental task. But, I know this isn't going to make anybody feel any better, but I have seen over and over and over again in my career that people rise to the challenges they face. And I personally do not believe for a second that teaching our students will be impacted in any way. I do not, I'm speaking for myself, do not believe that students are going to be negatively impacted. So, I don't think, teaching an outstanding teacher teaching here one period and teaching there in another period, I don't believe that the quality of instruction that teacher is providing will negatively impact students. So I guess here's the thing, and I know everything, it's going to be okay. I know with all of us working together, the taxpayers supported this, it's going to be okay. So this is helpful. We have another meeting next week, and this is the start of what is going to be a wonderful opportunity for our kids. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So next week, there's another meeting. This time it's going to be held in the transitional cafeteria building. It is handicapped accessible. We scheduled it for 7 o'clock, not knowing that the high school was having teacher night, meet the teacher night. So the school committee will discuss it tonight during our meeting about moving that time back a little bit to accommodate, we got 5 parents here, have children in the high school, so that they can go and do the meet the teacher night. And so we'll get that out to the public, sometime tomorrow, what time that'll be. Like I say, it was originally scheduled for 7 until we found out what was happening at the high school. I urge anyone, whether they're watching online or if they see it in the Valley Breeze or something, you can continue to email questions. You can email them to me, paul.demotica@cumberlandschools.org, or the superintendent, or any member of the school committee, and we will have this discussion and answer all those questions, hopefully by next week, next Thursday, and then take a vote of the school committee and send it to the building committee with our vision of what we think it's going to look like for the next 5 years. So with that said, I want to go ahead.
This is actually just a question for you, Paul. At this point, from what we were told needs to go to RIDE, is that it's a preliminary vision as opposed to a concrete plan. What is going to change between now and next week that we would need more information on to vote on?
Time. Until we get all the answers done, we won't take a vote. What? To whatever the public may have in regards to this project going forward. I mean, we could vote tonight. It's on the agenda to vote tonight, but we're not going to do that. We're going to vote on, hopefully next week, so that these guys can go do their work. Again, they've looked at 8, 9 different ideas and plans, build a new middle school, build a new elementary school. What if we did this? What if we did that? And a lot of it had to be thrown out because of cost. And to get something into every school. We've been doing this since last November, I think, or June. We started in June, and November, as soon as they got approved by the taxpayers, we've been dealing with this on a weekly basis, trying to come up with a plan that's presentable to the school committee and the public that works. And it has to work for everybody. My hope is to get it done next week. So that's where it stands right now. unless we decide next week we're not gonna vote, we gotta continue it another week, we'll continue it another week, but we're gonna do it weekly. We're not gonna do it every 2 weeks, and then November comes around, you know, Toronto has to get his work done. Colliers needs to get it done.
So I have a question, again, getting back to approving vision versus approving a final concept, because this is not a final concept, right? It's more approving that we're heading in the right direction, even though, like, for example, I have a bunch of detailed questions, and I don't know that they matter, right? Like, for example, are there any spaces big enough at every school for all staff when we do a professional development day? It's an example
Right,
of a
yeah.
question.
Yeah,
and
no, so those types of issues, we have lots of time on. What
Yeah.
the vote is really about is roughly these are going to be the size of the schools, roughly this is going to be the time frame in which everything gets completed, the big picture vision so that we can really move on design.
Yeah, so like, yeah, I mean, I had questions about flexible spaces and all that, but that's getting really detailed.
It will come.
And that will come later, and all of that isn't necessarily set in stone yet because we haven't gone through any design stage yet. I do have one question related to the budget, and it goes back to a question that was raised earlier. But when you're setting up an active learning classroom, and I do this for a living in the corporate space, and I've designed and built an active learning classroom facility, and the technology is a big piece of it. So the furniture, the space, the technology, and of course the pedagogy, the curriculum, all this has to be aligned to really benefit from an active learning space. So my question is around the furniture, the fit out, and the technology. Is that all included in the $83 million, or is that add-on? Because when you talk about your flexible spaces, there's lots of furniture that makes those things happen.
That's right.
Is that included in this?
It is. So what I would expect we would see is about 20% of that 83 million pays for all of those soft costs. So it pays for your vendor expenses, it pays for furniture, it pays for technology, anything that isn't physical built.
Includes the technology. Does that include the fit out of technology, meaning whether you're using smart boards or other interactive projectors or other things like that?
So the furnitures, fixtures, things that if you pick it up and shake it, it can fall out, then yes, that's within that 20% expectation. If it's something a bit more attached or built, then it needs to fit within the other 70 to 80% for hard costs. The reason I say 70 to 80% is we'll likely have a target closer to 70% so that we have a contingency buffer as we go through all of these things, and that's just kind of responsible financial planning in terms of how all the numbers will lay out. But so yes, the 83 million does anticipate that we hold a significant portion for all of those things.
Okay. All right. So just getting back to the question to Paul about the school committee voting to approve this, it's we're voting to approve the vision, even if, there was a question tonight that Heidi raised around the size of community, as an example.
So
Is that, if we vote to approve this as it is the question of potentially looking closer at community off the table?
Yes. So that is more difficult. So the vision really talks about the size of schools, the number of tracks we're going to send through each school. It would be very difficult to wait much longer about some of those core principles because they affect building size, and that that has cascading effect all the way down in terms of site planning, traffic, how many students you're bringing through, what the districting process looks like to make sure that we, are respectful of trying to keep people in their home communities. So major changes to sizes of schools is problematic.
Not
to be a pain, but back to, since if this is what we're voting on and it's gonna do classrooms, I think it really needs to be looked at. Because we have mainly community, Ashton and Cumberland Hill at max capacity, over capacity in classrooms, or that close. So if you go by doing some of the math, average class will be at least 23 students to 24, which is still a lot of kids per student, per class. And I would think long-term, we would want to have smaller class sizes to benefit all the kids, as opposed to, I think the learning and the early learning center, all that is fantastic. But looking at the big picture, if they're still having 25 and 26 kids per class and kids going out of district, that's affecting them all around. Socially, at school, they're not going to school with kids in their neighborhood. So I think that number of classrooms in some of these schools really needs to be looked at.
Just that you mentioned 3 schools, Community, Ashton, and Cumberland Hill. All of those schools are getting additions. All of them are getting more classrooms. Now, if you can go back up to the slide, Louis, for Ashton. No, back to the
The floor plan, right? The diagram.
And right now, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 classrooms that are being built at Ashton. The pre-K that's being occupied now is moving over to open up space for those other children. Right. Right. Right.
This plan as pre-K, which has nothing to do with the core, one kindergarten class teach all the other grades at a 2-track school, which means it's not adding anything to our current plan, K through 5, where we have our biggest problem. It's adding pre-K, which is an optional thing in the town. So it's adding 2 pre-K classes, and it's adding a kindergarten class, which we've already discussed how they go from 3 kindergarten to 2, 1 through 5.
Well, there's,
Adding classrooms for 1 through 5.
I mean, again, you know, we only have, 2 classrooms for pre-K right now? Or 4? We have 2 extra ones that are flexible in regards to what we're going to put in those rooms that they've come up with for conceptually of what we can do at Ashton.
Well, so for the public looking at it, it says pre-K class, but right now we have every single grade, because the enrollment was so high, we have a 3rd, 2nd grade this year. Next year we'll have a 3rd grade, and then in all the other grades, we have kids going out of district, and we're not adding to the problem, we're not adding classrooms to eliminate that problem.
It comes down to cost as well. The Toronto looked at a plan with adding a second, on a wing, a second story as well, and the cost was prohibitive for us to do that. So this is the plan that they've kind of come up with that works right now with the projected enrollment that Croppers has projected for the district. This will work, Louis.
We have 4 pre-Ks or 5? 4. We have 4 pre-Ks.
Okay, and
We have 4?
and how many Ks?
2. And 2 first grades, and 3 second grades, and then 2 of everywhere else. But we have kids who are sent out of district. And in the enrollment, it shows enrolled 414 for the future, for our capacity 399.
I understand what you're saying. I think that's right. And I one of the options that we have talked about is adding an additional classroom at Ashton, so that you're not below the peak enrollment at any time. So that's one of the things that we plan to further investigate as we move forward, because that issue that you raised will be addressed.
I just meant if this is what we were voting on, and it's not even just Ashton, obviously that's my concern, that's where my kids are currently enrolled, but looking at all of Cumberland, what to do for all the students in Cumberland is looking at the class size that is currently going on at some of these schools. And again, it's not just Ashton Community, Cumberland Hill, they have a huge class size. It's hard for the students, especially I have a son who needs extra help, and it's hard for the
Yeah,
and then to do $82 million worth of work and say, oh, we just don't have 25 kids in class.
I understand. Totally understood, totally understood. But what I said before was that you're approving a concept. I understand that it's an uncomfortable feeling when you think you're approving something that is set in concrete and that's the way it's going to be. That is not. As a matter of fact, just very briefly, so the Department of Ed has 4 stages for their projects. Stage 1, which we already got approved on. Stage 2, which we're scheduled to submit with. Stage 3 is when the construction document process begins, and Stage 4 is the construction of the building. Stage 3 begins with preliminary drawings. So, no. We're going to come back to you with a lot more detailed plans than this, and concept drawings and renderings that illustrate what the design concept is. That is a process that happens from now till when we submit Stage 2. There's an opportunity for even fine-tuning that at the beginning of Stage 3. I just don't want to leave you with the feeling that you're going to vote for something that is not that is set in concrete, it's set in stone, and it's not able to be fine-tuned later on. No, and I appreciate what he's saying, and that we're really under the gun to be able to submit this on time. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but we know the steps that we need to take to successfully get there. As far as comparing this option with any of the other 8 options that we looked at, yes, that would not be possible, because that would be just so different than what we're proposing. This really releases us to investigate this option. That's what we need to do. We've never come to this for you. We've never come to you for us to get direction to go ahead to investigate any direction. That's what we're here for, that look, this seems to make sense. There's a lot of issues that need to be addressed. There's a lot of concerns that are going to be addressed, but let us start the process.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My question would be for the school committee members, you know, in reference, I come in a little bit late tonight, I apologize, but little reference has been made to B.F. Norton, okay, Garvin, and McCourt Middle School. I want to see everybody get their fair share. You know, can you elaborate on that? I realize it's just in the design stage, and until you get a design stage, you know, a commitment on a design stage, are we being presumptuous, taking votes on, you know, to move forward without actually looking at the design stages themselves?
Yeah, go for it.
Rep, as you know, B.F. Norton is very dear to my heart. And
Mine too.
Yes. And B.F., Garvin, and McCourt will definitely be taken care of.
Mine too.
BF needs less work than any building in this town. A lot of their upgrades, I'm going to let him speak to the actual upgrades, but Garvin's going to have some substantial
I
work.
like that fourth floor you mentioned.
They don't need a fourth floor rep. So, but I'll let Derek speak to the particulars. But trust me when I say that every meeting I sit in, I'm looking at what's going on with BF, Garvin, and McCourt.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess to answer that more fully, the reason that you're not seeing those this evening is because the work plan is all internal within the exterior envelope of the building. So there are lots of things that need to be done at each of the schools, and I had mentioned nearly the entire subject of my meeting with the state today was parity and making sure that all schools get something. The focus this evening was on the schools primarily that are getting additions to address many of the comments we're receiving tonight about making sure that kids get to stay in their home district. How does this work? What do the tracks look like going through? We fully anticipated that would be of greatest interest to folks, and so that was our focus. But each and every school will be looked at as we look at the budget and make sure that all of your students have something to be really excited about.
I appreciate that. I would hope that you would look at the priorities, and I want to reiterate to the school committee again, while our elementary schools, okay, when you prioritize them, okay, make sure everybody is included. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so the meeting, we have another meeting Thursday. We're going to discuss it here tonight about changing the time back so that people can go to teacher night. It's going to be held in the transitional building in the auditorium, in the cafeteria downstairs. I see people taking pictures and so forth of the slides. We will make sure Mike Chandler, our tech guy, gets this presentation put up on the school department website so that you all have a chance to download it and take a look at it as well. And we'll continue with this discussion next Thursday. So I appreciate everyone coming tonight. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and for those that want to leave, and we will continue with our school committee for tonight. So thank you all for coming. And I just want to point out to those that are here, besides Rep. McLaughlin, Senator Pearson's here. We have another state rep from Woonsocket area, covers Cumberland as well. They're here. We have town council members. The mayor's here. I know our former mayor was here as well. Everyone's concerned about this, and we appreciate you all coming. So thank you.